Hello, listeners. This is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This will be the continuation of Fall Apart, Collect the Pieces. This will be Part 13, Chapters 20 and 21. Chapter 20. Between being force-fed breakfast by his surly hero partner and having Eri and Koda around to distract him, his nerves had dulled over the course of the morning. This turn of events, while moderately stressful, was a good thing. It was a public show of support, and those had been in short supply lately. In addition, the mass exodus of Ida-10's staff would be breaking news by noon. In the time that it had taken for them to eat breakfast, their peers had awoken and found similar inboxes full of resumes and cover letters. None of them were in a better position to mass hire new sidekicks than Smash Bang. They still had to work it out with accounting and HR, but the more Izuku thought about it, the more doable it seemed. Given the last month, the optimism that logic afforded him was a huge relief. Usually, the more he thought about things, the worse they got. "Where will we put them all, though?" Izuku asked, swirling coffee in his mug like a fine wine as he pondered. "We're tapped out on facility space, not to mention that our patrol routes are already saturated." Excuse me," Koda protested. "You gonna let those D-listers sidekicks work for you when I've been trying to get into Smash Bang for years?" "We all agreed that you needed to round out your experience before we take you on, Koda," Izuku reminded him with an exasperated sigh. "Well, if we're already hiring a shit ton of new sidekicks, we might as well steal the little shit from Backdraft while we're at it," Katsuki pointed out. "He can finish out his last year of work study with us, and Koda, Eri, and Katsuma all have contracts with their respective agencies, and we're not going to ruin our relationships with good heroes by poaching heroes before their contracts are up," Izuku stated firmly. "They can join us when they graduate." Both Koda and Katsuki rolled their eyes, pouting like infants because they didn't get their way. Izuku rolled his eyes, and Eri giggled, leaning into Koda's side. "You could always get yourself fired and tank your grades so I can surpass you," she suggested, grinning. "I'd be a more charming valedictorian anyway." "Bite me," Koda grumbled. "Anyway," Izuku interrupted before Eri could do just that. "If we're going to hire all the people who came to us, we need to figure out how we're going to redistribute responsibilities." "For the record, we're not going to hire all the people who came to us," Katsuki said, booking no room for argument. Izuku sighed again. While he had been enjoying the breakfast that Katsuki had bullied him into enjoying, Katsuki had started sorting through the emails they'd received. He was displeased with some of the cover letters, to say the least. "We're at least going to consider everyone." "One of those shitheels said it was your responsibility to hire her because you ruined Ida-10. The fucking audacity aside, can you imagine an attitude like that working with our sidekicks? I don't fucking think so, Deku." "If they're good candidates whose skill sets can mesh well with others, we should consider it, assuming we have the space and the bandwidth for them," he argued. "What if they said it about me?" Katsuki demanded. "Would you still be so happy-go-lucky about the blatant disrespect?" "No, but you're not responsible for HGI dropping Ida-10. I am." "No, you're fucking not," he snapped. "Did you use Ida's asshole like a sock puppet and make him slander Crazy Eyes and her work? No." "Gross mental image aside, he's right," Eri said. "You're not responsible for Ingenium's actions, even if they happen because of your drama. He's the one who chose to handle it that way." Izuku sighed, sensing a losing argument. "Why don't we let HR take care of filtering out candidates?" he suggested. "And focus on the actual problem. We're not equipped to take on this many sidekicks, Kachan. Where are we going to put them?" The blonde sipped his coffee, brow furrowing thoughtfully. "We've been talking about expansion for a while now," he pointed out. "Maybe instead of expanding our current facilities, we can go with satellite facilities instead." "You mean put Smash Bang offices in Ida's district?" he asked, apprehensive. "You do understand how that would look PR-wise, right?" "Optically speaking, can we really look any fucking worse right now?" he drawled. "Who the fuck cares what the horde of extras thinks?" "We do!" "We're not going to horn in on his territory. If those sidekicks are more familiar with that district and live in that district, it makes more sense to have them there." "Just because optics aren't a priority doesn't mean that we should toss them out the window altogether," Izuku insisted. "We're going to have to be insanely transparent if we do this, Kachan. The public can't assume, for even a second, that we're being smug or shoving it in Ida's face. It has to be all logistics and compassion." Katsuki rolled his eyes. "I know, nerd. I don't want to start shit. I'm down to figure out how to spin it. Besides, we need to clear it with the commission, so it's not like we can just invade and take over. Relax." Izuku ignored the gnawing nerves and forced a smile. "It's not a bad idea," he allowed. We can say we're working to make the transition easier on the sidekicks we're taking on. And making sure that their patrols stay covered, Eri added. She blushed a moment later, hunching over. Sorry. No, you're right. Izuku smiled, genuine this time. That's a good point. PR can probably work with that. The rest of this is just figuring out how we're going to pay and insure 37 sidekicks. 29, Katsuki argued. Izuku ignored him. And how we're going to afford agency space. Ida's district is not exactly cheap, real estate-wise. We might have to scrap for a little while, but between loans and cutting our own salaries, we should be fine. We could also push up the promotional line we've been planning to help cover the costs, Katsuki replied. He was so calm about it all, so ready with answers and comfortable with the shifting ground that Izuku couldn't help but be put at ease as well. Okay, he said, finally relaxing into his seat. We can give it a shot, but if it ends up being a shit show, we gotta figure something else out. Sure, whatever, Katsuki agreed. Now, can we not talk about fucking work anymore? Izuku shook his head, smiling. Sure, I'll send this over to the team, and we can watch movies or something. I was thinking video games, something I can kick your ass at, Katsuki suggested, rising from the table. So, nothing, Izuku teased, smile going mischievous at the edges. You're so full of shit, he scoffed. When's the last time you beat me at anything? Izuku smirked and started counting on his fingers. Mario Party last week? Ultra Smash last game night? Fuck you, you cheated. Monopoly at family dinner, sparring for the last 3 years. You're so full of shit, I beat you last week. Did you, though? He grinned as Katsuki bristled, dodging him when he tried to grab Izuku in a headlock. I'm gonna murder you, you little fuck. You're gonna try. Eri cleared her throat. If you two can't get along, I'm gonna make you both play Unicorn Battle Party with me, and I'm gonna beat both your asses. Watch your mouth, Katsuki huffed. She pinned him with an unimpressed stare and, to Izuku's utter dismay, flipped him off with both hands. Your dad's gonna kill us if you do that in front of him, Izuku warned her. I'll blame it on Mirio or Hitoshi, she shrugged. They were in the middle of Yoshi's tropical island when the commission made their move. Honestly, Izuku hadn't expected them to say anything for weeks. Sure, their overall mission and structure were better, but they were still an enormous bureaucracy. Decisions took time. They were bickering when Kota interrupted, ribbing each other as they fucked around in-game. Holy shit, he said, drawing their attention. He was hunched over his phone, eyes flying across the screen and getting wider as he went. A smile was pulling at the corner of his mouth. Katsuki tossed the controller aside, pulling his phone out and looking for whatever Kota was reading. What is it? Izuku asked, hard in his throat. The commission, he replied, eyes still glued to the screen. A moment later, Katsuki was shoving his phone in front of Izuku's face so that they could read together. He could feel his phone going off in his pocket, so whatever it was had to be a big deal. As though he knew that Izuku was too frazzled to absorb the words on the screen, Katsuki began reading aloud. We'd like to thank you all for your patience as we work to resolve a myriad of issues over the past few weeks. Many of you are frustrated and uncertain of who to trust. We hope to provide as much clarity as we can. First, upon reviewing the circumstances surrounding Hiro Deku's comportment during the rescue attempts at the building collapse, we'd like to assure you all that his actions were not only compliant with HPSC safety standards, but above and beyond in regard to the comfort and welfare of the victims involved. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief. He'd never confirmed whether complaints were submitted against him, opting to focus on the glaring problems he could control, but it was good to know that whatever investigation they'd held had come up clean. He was tempted to send Ibarra flowers. We'd also like to address the attacks earlier this week and the circumstances that led to them. Regrettably, we are not currently in a position to provide details. The chain of events that led to this disaster is unclear, and revealing the information we have at this juncture could lead to further destruction and unrest. Due to the catastrophic nature of these attacks, we'll be declassifying information once we've received and reviewed all the relevant information. However, until we're done investigating, we cannot risk jeopardizing more lives. We apologize for not having adequate information at this time, and our inability to offer insight into what transpired. That's it, Eri protested. Why the hell were you so excited then? She asked Kota, kicking his ankle. Let him finish, Kota hissed back. However, Katsuki continued, scowling, we are prepared to make steps in the right direction and take preliminary action. As of today, and until our investigation concludes, Aravity's hero license is suspended and will remain revoked until we're more certain of her role in these events. Izuku's breath stuttered in his chest as Eri gave out a little whoop of victory, throwing her arms around Kota and squeezing him tight. It took a lot for Hero's license to get suspended, and the public knew it. Making that statement was a strong move, and it was in his favor. Katsuki threw an arm around his shoulder as he pulled out his own phone, probably to read over his shoulder. He was anxious to know how the public, not to mention their friends, were reacting. He scanned through his text, touched by all the people who were checking in on him. "Hitoshi and Hanta want to come over," he told them, smiling a little wider. "I'm going to veto the champagne, though." "Fuck no, you're not," Katsuki protested. "It's my day off, and we're celebrating the commission's decision to grow a fucking backbone." Izuku snorted. "Fine. Should I tell them to bring pizza, too?" "Do you only eat pizza unless I cook for you?" Katsuki asked seriously. Izuku elbowed him. "Of course not," he huffed. "It's Koda's favorite food group, though, and he's still recovering." The group chat was flooded, and he was way too far behind to catch up on all of it. The general sentiment was positive, though, glad that the commission had actually taken a stand amidst the turmoil. Mina was easily the most vocal, and her messages were bordering on disturbing, but elated. Just a few hours ago, he'd woken up certain that it was going to be a good day, and despite being terrified of jinxing it, he'd been right. It finally felt like things were turning in his favor, and his whole body felt light with relief. That feeling carried him through the rest of the day, especially as their friends' shifts ended and his house began to fill. Hitoshi and Hanta came first, Hanta bearing champagne and pizza, and Hitoshi bearing a metric fuck ton of cookies. Izuku frowned at them as he hefted the box onto the dining table. Hitoshi gave him a bland stare. "They're Aries. It's the overbearing brother tax I have to pay whenever I crash your hangouts," he explained. "Cupcakes or cookies paid up front, no IOUs. Izuku looked at Eri with an amused grin, and she smirked back at him, more smug than he'd ever seen her. "Can I have one? Or do you plan to eat, 100 cookies?" 150, Hitoshi replied in perfect monotone, accepting a champagne flute from Hanta. "Jesus fuck," Katsuki muttered, pressed up against his side. "Your blood sugar must be sky high." "My blood sugar is none of your business," Eri huffed. "Until I'm your sidekick, at least. Hire me if you want an opinion." "Mouthy brat," Katsuki grumbled as Izuku laughed into his hands, shoulders shaking with silent mirth. By 8 p.m., their little celebration was in full swing. Kyoka and Denki came through after their patrol, more booze in her hands and more video games in his. Izuku recognized some of the games, blanching as he realized that he'd probably have to replace his controllers after tonight. Within an hour, Katsuki and Denki were locked in an impressive battle, yelling at each other so loudly that Izuku could barely hear his phone ringing over the noise. He pulled it out, expecting his mom to be calling for daily updates he'd been giving since the divorce, but it wasn't his mom. It was Commissioner Suzuki. Chapter 21. Izuku stood from the couch, ignoring the way the room went silent. He skirted the couch as his stomach churned. It was 9 p.m. The commissioner himself was calling. That could only mean something serious, something urgent. "Deku," Katsuki called. Izuku looked over at him. "Commissioner," he replied. Kachan's eyes widened, and tension stifled the room. "I'm going to take this. You guys keep going." He nodded, but nobody moved to restart the game. He accepted the call, moving into the hallway. "Good evening, sir." "Midoriya," Suzuki greeted him. "Has something happened?" he asked. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat. "Not exactly. I apologize if I alarmed you," he said. "We do need your help, though." "Sir?" "We released a statement this afternoon, as I'm sure you saw, but we hadn't uncovered how your notebooks ended up at the epicenter of a villain uprising," he explained. "Yes, I read the statement," Izuku replied, trying not to sound as impatient as he was. "At first," he said, "given the nature of your marital issues and the related complications, we thought that Aravati sold your notebooks as collector's items without doing her due diligence on the buyer. At the time, it made the most sense, considering that she was trying to maximize the profit for your belongings." "I don't think she would have sold them, considering that she admitted to everything else," Izuku said. He was loath to defend her, but it didn't make sense. Why lie about selling the notebooks if she didn't think they were important? Especially after admitting that she'd sold everything else, it didn't make sense. Then again, neither did she. "You're right," Suzuki told him. "When we looked through your security footage, we saw her removing your possessions from the premises. She told the truth. The notebooks were put in the recycling, unaltered. She'll be held responsible for malicious negligence on multiple fronts." "Thank you for letting me know," Izuku said. "If you wouldn't mind, I'd like a copy of the footage for my own records." "Of course, we're sending the originals back to you. We've made copies for our investigation," Suzuki told him. "That's not why I called, though." Izuku's stomach twisted, hoping he wasn't about to get more bad news. "I'm listening," he said. After watching the footage, we believe we found the person responsible for the attacks. We picked him up a couple of hours ago," he said. "He'll only speak to you." "How soon do you need me?" he asked, anxious. He wouldn't be calling if it weren't urgent. Suzuki sighed. "The sooner the better, if you don't mind. He's a civilian, and he seems to be willing to be forthcoming as long as you're the one interviewing him. Can you come in now?" He took stock of himself, noting that he wasn't exactly sober, nor was he alone at the moment. "I have some friends over for moral support," he explained. "And we've been drinking, sir. It's your call." Suzuki gave a displeased hum, considering his options. Izuku winced. He felt bad that he wasn't in top form when the commissioner himself was going above and beyond to resolve conflicts that started in Izuku's home. "If you're not too inebriated," he said at last, "I think it would be best for you to come in now. The sooner we figure out what happened, the sooner we can rest assured that no further incidents will take place." "Of course, sir," Izuku agreed. "I'll be there." "We both will," Katsuki said, startling Izuku out of his skin. He was listening just a few steps away, waiting for him in the doorway. Gratefulness seeped into his skin, warm and comforting. He didn't know what he would do without Kachan. He was his rock in a storm, and he was relieved that, without even asking, Katsuki was refusing to let him do any of this alone. "Unfortunately," Suzuki said hesitantly, "he seems to have a grudge of some sort for dynamite. I'm not sure his presence would make for a productive interrogation." Izuku's heart sank. Kachan seemed determined to hold it up, though. He yanked the phone out of Izuku's hand. "Then I'll stay behind the glass," he snapped. "He doesn't have to know that I'm there, but I'm gonna be there. Deku ain't doing this shit alone, and I'm his partner." Suzuki sounded tiny, but his sigh was audible. The man knew a losing battle when he heard one. "Very well. I'll expect you both within the hour." His name was Hiroki Takeda, and he'd been caught on camera approaching the recycling bins and fishing out the notebooks. Suzuki let them watch beforehand so they could get a grasp of the situation. Takeda looked reverent as he flipped through them, smile so wide that he could have outshone the sun. He approached the dumpster within minutes of Ochako tossing the notebooks inside, so he must have been watching the house. He was only 18. They watched him from behind the two-way mirror in the interview room, trying to get a read on him. The kid looked harmless, only a few years older than Eri and Kota, and nervous as fuck. Izuku felt a little sick, and it wasn't because of the booze. How could someone so young, so anxious, and clearly out of his depth, be responsible for so much chaos and pain? But there was no question. He'd been the last known person in possession of his notebook, so somehow he was involved. Izuku put his earpiece in and took a swig of the crappy convenience store coffee they'd picked up on the way. "I'm ready," he said, squaring his shoulders. "I'm in your ear," Kachan assured him. "Relax, all right?" "He's in quirk-canceling cuffs," Suzuki assured them. "They're bolted to the table, so he's effectively immobile." Izuku wasn't worried about that. He was the number 6 hero. He'd inherited his quirk from All Might. This anxious teenager, who'd made a mess, wasn't a threat. Not after Shigaraki. He was afraid that he'd misstep and ruin any chance they had at getting information out of him. He entered the room and Takeda brightened immediately, his smile bright and excited, maybe even adoring. "Mr. Deku," he breathed. "It's really you." Izuku blinked at him. "Hello," he replied, uncertain. "Are you aware of why you're here?" "Of course," Takeda replied, a little more serious. "But that's why I wanted to talk to you. I know you'll understand when I explain." Izuku did not like where this was going, and they'd barely even started. He sat across from Takeda. "Can you start from the beginning?" he asked, tone kind even as his gut roiled with anxiety. "I'm your biggest fan," he blurted out, blushing a moment later. "I know you like your privacy, but one day I was coming home from work and I saw you driving into your home, only I didn't know it was yours at the time. I waited outside, hoping to get an autograph, but you never came out." "Ah, so that's how he figured out where Izuku lived. Unfortunate." "You're my fan?" he asked, a little horrified, but keeping that sentiment out of his voice. "I've been your fan for years," he agreed. "So sometimes, before work, and I'm really sorry, I know it's super invasive, I hang out across the street and try to get pictures of you leaving. I never get to see you in action because I work pretty far away from most villain activity." "You've been taking pictures of me," he uttered. He couldn't mask his displeasure this time. "Only if you're in costume," he swore. That didn't make it better. "And I always edit out your address if I post them online." Izuku grit his teeth. Anyone with moderately good computer skills could match images of his house to Google Earth or something. That was not the reassurance Takeda hoped it was. "What the fuck?" Katsuki murmured in his ear. Izuku concurred. Let's put that on hold for now, he said, consciously keeping his jaw unclenched. He was seriously not okay with the invasion of privacy, but he needed to keep Takeda calm. Why don't we talk about the notebooks? He brightened again, and Izuku wondered if he understood just how bad this whole situation was. Why did he seem so pleased? I saw Aravati throw them away, he explained, clearly thrilled with himself. I knew what they were as soon as I saw them. I'd seen you writing in them in footage from your days at UA. They were personal property, he said seriously, and they were thrown away without my knowledge or consent. Takeda floundered, looking chastened. I didn't realize, he said sheepish. I didn't even think about it, really. I saw her throw them away and thought, this is my chance, you know? I could have something that used to belong to you, and then I read them, and they were such an amazing insight into who you are. I felt so close to you. Jesus, fuck, this kid is deranged, Katsuki whispered, and once again, Izuku concurred. Why didn't you turn them in when you realized you were reading sensitive information? He asked. I would think any fan of mine would go the extra mile to make sure the public is safe. Takeda frowned, tilting his head in confusion. I didn't turn them in because I read them, he explained. Izuku frowned too. What do you mean? He asked. There was so much amazing quirk analysis, and I learned so much about your life, he said reverently. I saw so much about your childhood, how people treated you before you had a quirk, especially dynamite. He spat like it was a dirty word. Fuck, that explains it, Katsuki muttered in his ear. And then I saw all the stuff you wrote about Hero Society, he continued, blind to the dismay on Izuku's face. About how heroes glorify power at the expense of the people they're supposed to protect, how fame and fortune matter more than the actual core of heroism. It was an eye-opener. I'd never seen it the way you had. Takeda. No, listen, he cried, wounded at the pity in Izuku's voice. It was fate. I had the information, which meant it was my responsibility to see your vision come to life, to help you create a hero society truly built on heroes, striving to protect us instead of striving for the limelight. I was so scared, so nervous, but I knew that I was doing the right thing. Once the media turned on you, they dragged your name through the mud, focusing on rumors instead of how good you've done. No matter how many people you'd saved, no matter how amazing and good you are, the public turned their backs on you, and I needed to show them what a real hero looks like, a hero like you, working to save them no matter what they think. You're the greatest out of all of them. You know what heroism is better than anyone, from their role in society to how their quirks work. I had to show them. What did you do? Izuku rasped, eyes stinging and throat tight with horror. Is this what he inspired? Takeda, what did you do? It seemed that Takeda was finally starting to realize that he may have misstepped. I had to show them that you knew best, he explained. That in a crisis, even with everyone against you, you would rise to the occasion. You could save them all by yourself if you wanted to, because there isn't a single hero who's better than you. The only way I could think to do that was to create the crisis. Izuku felt sick and heartbroken. Oh, fuck, Katsuki swore, voice full of horrified realization. What did you do? He asked again, voice cracking as his eyes flooded. How had he steered this kid so wrong? How many of his fans thought like this? We need to know, Takeda. He swallowed audibly, casting his eyes down. It took some research, he began, but I reached out to various villains on the dark web. I asked them to meet me so that I could tell them my plan, he admitted. It started off all right, and they seemed to be on board, but once they realized I had your notebooks, your analysis, they took over. They cut me out of the plan and disappeared. I didn't even know if they'd go through with it, but they'd taken the notebooks with them, so I hoped they would. And then went off almost exactly how I planned, except they brought more villains into the mix. The result ended up a lot bigger than I thought it would, especially since some of the smaller villains who weren't a part of it took advantage of the chaos. Izuku slumped back in his seat, pressing the heels of his palms into his eyes. That didn't stem the flow of tears that had started, horrified and miserable. You're going to give us a list of all the villains you reached out to, Izuku said quietly, voice trembling and raw. And you're going to hand your computer over to the commission. The commission? He protested. Deku, they're an ineffective bureaucracy that protects immorality in order to protect their image. They used to be, he interrupted. He raised his eyes to meet Takeda's, and misery met disappointment in each other's gaze. You have to listen to me now. You're young, so you haven't seen how much has changed since I was in school, since I wrote those notebooks. All of those things are still happening, because we're still growing, Izuku shouted. He took a moment to school himself, took a deep breath to keep himself calm, or at least as calm as he could be. You've got this, Deku, Katsuki murmured, soft and assuring. I know this sucks, but you've got to tell him what he needs to hear. You can do it." He took a shuddering breath, bracing himself. He had so much to say, but what if it fell on deaf ears? What if this kid who had misinterpreted him so badly was beyond his help? Either way, he'd be serving jail time for colluding with villains, for orchestrating what amounted to a terror attack. He wished he'd never written those notebooks. He could have prevented so much pain by keeping his thoughts in his head, away from prying eyes. "I don't even know where to start," he murmured. "I know which entry sparked this. I remember writing it. It was after my first year sports festival, and I was angry on behalf of one of my friends. I saw things that needed to change, and once we defeated Shigaraki, it became my main priority. Our main priority. My classmates and I, along with most of the heroes in our generation, have been working hard to make things better, to make the commission more transparent, to make heroes accountable for their mistakes. It's been getting better, through hard work and transparency. Lasting change takes time and hard work. It's not magically better overnight, but we're moving in the right direction. Not fast enough. So you thought this would make it move faster, that people would see I could do no wrong? Takeda, I'm human. Of course I can do wrong. I don't know everything, and I certainly can't save everyone, not by myself." "You could, though," he insisted. "From your knowledge alone, You're not listening. Do you know what All Might's fatal flaw was? The fact that he tried to do everything alone. He kept all his major battles a secret, and he held the world on his shoulders, and it's the main reason he had to retire, the reason he lost his power. The entire point of my career has been to prove that we can't do it all by ourselves. Making the world a better place is a team sport, and I can't do it alone. I need the help of the Commission and my fellow heroes, and they need my help too. It's how we keep each other honest and good. It's how we make society better, together." Takeda looked frustrated and obstinate, and Izuku recognized the look. It was a look of someone who'd made up his mind, and was unwilling to admit they might be wrong because it would mean accepting responsibility. "It's not better, though. They're not honest and good. It's still full of self-serving heroes who care more about their image than who they protect." "No system is perfect," Izuku interrupted, "especially one as large as the Commission, or society as a whole. That's why we hold heroes accountable, if and when they do wrong. You can't always tell, but you can hold people responsible for their actions. That's how we improve. And besides, the bad heroes weren't the heroes who were hurt by your actions. The good ones were. The ones who put themselves on the line to protect. They protected people who needed them, and too many of them were hurt for no reason. 5 of them died, not to mention countless civilians. Do you understand how much unnecessary pain and destruction you caused? And you did it to prove a point that was already proven, to build what we've already been working to build through collaboration." He broke off and took a deep breath to rein himself in. Takeda took his silence as permission to speak. "I did it for you," he insisted, sounding upset and unstable. "Those heroes that you say are good, they turn their backs on you. I don't understand why you're defending them. Your strategy saved them. Shoto said it himself." "I don't care what they think of me," he yelled. "I don't give a shit about my image, and if you were my fan, you'd know that. I don't need them to like me. I just need to protect them. I don't do it for their love or gratefulness. I do it to keep them safe. You put them in harm's way. What made you think that I'd be happy that you put people in danger to make me look better? I'd rather be hated by the world than see innocents terrified and hurt. And you didn't just put civilians in danger, but you endangered my loved ones too. I had to watch people I care about be ruthlessly targeted by villains and keep them all out of harm's way. If I'd failed, it would have been on me. Do you think I would have recovered from that?" I didn't mean..." Takeda stuttered, finally understanding the gravity. "If Manuel and Backdraft weren't there, Geyser, my protege, would have been killed, and I would have had to watch it happen without being able to help. If Dynamite hadn't been there, Red Riot would have been killed trying to protect a civilian from a falling building." Takeda bristled again, the obstinate sheen re-entering his eyes. "Dynamite isn't a hero," he snapped. "I'm not sure why you chose him as a partner after what I read, but he's just in it for the glory, just like Endeavor was." "Shut the fuck up," Izuku hissed. He wondered, briefly, if he could blame his lack of impulse control on the champagne. Takeda's mouth snapped shut, eyes going wide. "Do you know who stood by my side through all of this? Especially the shit that you put me through? Dynamite, my best friend and partner, has taken on twice as many shifts because the public doesn't trust me to save them anymore. He's been carrying my weight for the last month. He's saved my life countless times. He's got an ego the size of the sun, but he's earned it through hard work, and when push comes to shove, he'll always do the right thing, even if it means putting himself in the line of fire. He's the most important person in my life, and the shit you read in that notebook was shit we got over a decade ago. Shit we resolved with blood, sweat, and tears, and through having each other's backs. There's nobody in the world I trust more. There's nobody in the world I love more, and you nearly got him killed." "Deku, calm down," Kachan soothed. "Yelling at him isn't going to help. Relax, all right? Breathe." Izuku did as he was told, closing his eyes, taking another breath, unclenching his jaw. It's not completely your fault. In fact, it's mostly Aravity's, but everything you did to help me has made things worse. By using my notebooks, you did the opposite of what you wanted to do. People are pissed I had them in the first place, even though I used them to help my peers improve. You handed them over to villains and went against everything I stand for, he said, heart bleeding. They were both crying now, one in shame and the other in sorrow. I was trying to help, Takeda uttered. Izuku looked at him, overwhelmed by everything he felt. Pity, anger, sadness, regret. He didn't even know which one he felt most. It breaks my heart that you read my thoughts in their most unfiltered form and came up with this as the solution, he said honestly. You missed the point of all of it, because you put me on a pedestal, and you hurt so many people in my name. Help me make it better. It can't be fixed, but if you tell us what we need to know, we can start making amends. We can make sure nobody else gets hurt by this. But we need to find those notebooks and secure them, along with the people who had them. Help me do that. He pleaded. Takeda looked at him, defeated and morose. Izuku wanted to feel bad for him, but was encompassed on all sides by the chaos he created. Maybe that was his legacy. Maybe Izuku inspired ugliness in people like Takeda and Ochako. Maybe he was the source of his own downfall, and always would be. Finally, Takeda spoke. I'll try. Relief soothed the edges of his heartbreak, and he heard Kachan breathe a sigh of relief. We've got this, Deku, Kachan told him. You got him to cooperate. We'll figure out the rest. Izuku only hoped it would be enough. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 21 of Fall Apart, Collect the Pieces. Chapter 22 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying, and as always, thank you so much for listening.